and welcome to today's Energy Central Power Session, Enhancing Damage Prevention and Public Safety with AI Innovation. We're so glad you're joining us. Before we get started, I'd like to send a big thank you to 4M for making today's event possible. And at the end of today's session, we're doing something a little different. 4M is hosting a short 15-minute demo after party where they'll pull back the curtain and show how they're using AI for utility mapping to help the industry build better together. If you're curious how this actually works in the real world, just stick around after the webinar. They'd love to show you. And now I'm happy to hand things over to Mike Smith to get things started. Mike, welcome to the event. Take it away.
All right. Thank you, PJ. And who doesn't like a good after party, right? So we're all looking forward to that. But I want to thank our panelists for joining us today and our audience for joining us today. We have some good stuff for you. If you've attended any of our power sessions in the past, we really try to focus on the panel discussion, and that's certainly the case today. I have a few opening remarks that I think will just help kind of frame the issues that we'll be talking about and get us all kind of aligned in the topic that we'll be covering. So PJ, if you could jump to the next one. I'll just talk to this real briefly. The real message here is that there's a lot of construction activity going on in the utility industry. I think we all know that. And it's a combination of aging infrastructure. It's a combination of new use cases that are driving the grid to do things that it was not originally intended to do. There's also, of course, a lot of efforts around undergrounding, particularly out here in Northern California where I'm based. So just keep in mind that the technology is cool, the use cases are cool, but there's some real drivers around here around efficiency and cost management and, of course, safety for those folks out in the field. So we'll jump to the next slide now. And here, these are just some issues and trends that when you start looking at the 811 space, if you will, there's a few things that do leap out at us. That first one around no-call digs, 46% of Americans plan to do a dig without contacting 811. That's a little alarming. And of course, that's going to cause a lot of cost issues, safety issues, performance and efficiency issues. Also, when you start thinking about having better intelligence in terms of how you do your utility locating work, there's a real ROI to be had there. Obviously, there's safety and efficiency, but you're going to save costs here. And you can see there's a $4.62 million estimate there in potential savings from damages and downtime. Similarly, risk and delays are a big part of the equation here, especially when you start looking at having that intelligence that you maybe have not had in the past. And those inefficiencies and failures are very expensive to the tune of $61 billion annually. So maybe just keep those numbers in mind as we walk through some of what we'll be sharing with you today. The next slide, we're going to look at some of the benefits of using AI in 811 processes. And again, I'm not going to read all of these to you, but I think if you can think about crews out in the field doing their work, undergrounding infrastructure, and all the different sorts of issues that they run into typically, there's some challenges there. And when you start thinking about, the quality of the GIS data, when you start thinking about how can we do this more efficiently and more safely, having intelligence as a part of that mix is a big part of what we think is going to help make that more successful. So for instance, in the next slide is a real brief example of what that looks like. And this is a screenshot from our sponsors today. And this is kind of an example of some of the stuff we'll be talking about today, where you have this intelligence that's going to enable you, again, be more efficient, save money, be more safe for those folks out in the field. And again, this is just a really brief example of what you'll be seeing on the back end of today's session, where we'll do a deep dive into some of the technology behind a perspective like this. So with those thoughts in mind, we're going to dive into our panel discussion. And again, we have a really good panel with us today. We've done some good prep work going into this. And I'm going to start by introducing our first panelist, and I'll ask him an opening question, but let me introduce him first. So Andy Brooks is the Damage Prevention Manager for Dominion Energy in Virginia. He has over 2 decades of experience in utility safety, claims management, and underground infrastructure protection. Since 2011, he has led Dominion's electric distribution damage prevention efforts across Virginia and North Carolina, driving improvements in locator accuracy, stakeholder collaboration, and field education. Andrew's career spans roles in claims investigation, regulatory compliance, and field supervision, including positions with the State Corporation Commission and UtiliQuest. His strategic leadership has consistently enhanced safety outcomes and operational efficiency. Andrew holds a degree from Virginia Commonwealth Virginia Commonwealth University with a focus on business and computer science. Andy, thank you for joining us. I'm going to kind of kick things off with a question for you today that's kind of a broad question. I don't think we can go to LinkedIn or look at any of the online publications that we all read, like Energy Central, and not see and hear about AI, both in terms of data centers and AI creating this big increase in load, but also AI as a tool to help solve a lot of these business problems. So where are you seeing, or can you give maybe an example or two of a use case where AI is proving to be a difference maker in Dominion's damage prevention and public safety efforts?
Absolutely, and thanks for the introduction, Mike, and really happy to be a part of the panel. I appreciate everyone and their input today. And you already touched on it, in one of your slides earlier. Our electric outage analysis tool has really been a game changer for us. That's going back to talking about the risk score per tickets, and looking at those and trying to figure out how we can take next steps and create interventions to again look at those tickets and see which ones are going to be the most prone to damages. As we kind of talked about, some of you may know, Virginia is a highly regulated state. We've been focusing on advanced metrics for over 25 years, or at least as my time here in the state and being part of the industry. So our the enforcement folks, all other stakeholders, they understand the need, the want for those advanced metrics. So right around prior to the pandemic, a little bit afterwards, our IT team came to us and said, hey, look, we can build a tool and that'll help predict 20% in basically it came back to this problem in this formula. They said, hey, if we look at 20%, 20% of these tickets are really causing 80% of the damages. If we can intervene, we can start looking at that stuff. How can we drive those damages down? So our IT team worked with Virginia 811, or a local 811. We also have North Carolina 811 that's going about this process. And they take those 811 tickets. We ingest those. We look at things like weather, the excavator's history, census data, and proximity to the line, just for a few examples. Of course, those are we're going to expand what we're looking at over time to get more information. But once all of that's we get the ticket, we compare it against those different initiative or different metrics. A risk score is then provided, and that's where we start, as I mentioned earlier, the intervention process. We can take a singular ticket, or as we do here at Dominion, every night we take all of the high and medium priority tickets that the risk score is kicked out, and we send an email to the affected excavator, and it's got links, different pieces of information to say, hey, here's the best way to go about your excavation and have a safe dig. Here are the tools. Here's a link to our enforcement. You get it straight from the horse's mouth, if you will. So that has been huge. That goes out every night. And then of course, if we have agents out in the field that need to look at a ticket or perform an intervention, they can go singularly, look up a ticket, pull that information, and help that individual excavator, or provide information about a near miss. So it's really proven to be it's obviously part of your slide deck. We're not the only utility using it, but having that internal is really helpful. Having that, we have IT, if there are any issues or we want to do some upgrades, we're able to do that in-house. And really some kind of the highlights of that entire process is moving AI out of that pilot phase, getting that real world, daily ops type of feedback from, hey, look, we're no longer, this is real time. This is something we're running every day. And this is, with those interventions and with that email, that's only improving communications with the damage prevention stakeholders. And if anybody goes to, as a member of the CGA or a part of that group, they'll tell you mapping and communications are the biggest ways to drive damages down. those two things, if you couple that, you're going to have a successful program. So, that it's proven to be, a huge tool in our tool belt. We want to add, some more of those tools. 4M's got some great ideas. Many other, these companies utilizing AI can streamline these things. And so for really next steps for us, it's integrating that. It's integrating, this kind of data and this information into other, our OMS, different systems, so that we can share that information and have situational awareness for all of our, for the entirety of Dominion. So yeah, thanks for the question. And I can tell you, this is just the beginning, but it's a very, AI is going to be the next step, for us in advanced metrics.
Great. Thanks for kicking us off, Andy. And you saw me scribbling some notes here. I'm going to want to revisit a couple of things you said around the role of the regulators. And I'm also curious about some data issues that I may want to circle back with you on. So as we get into this, be prepared. You've been warned. But good. Let's move on to our next panelist. Robert Turgeson is the Damage Prevention Manager at National Grid, and he's also the Vice President on the Board of Directors for New York 811. With over 36 years at National Grid, Robert Turgeson has dedicated his career to advancing field operations and excavation safety. For the past 20 years, he has led National Grid's damage prevention programs across New York City and Long Island. Robert also manages strategic partnerships with National Grid's key damage prevention vendors, including 4M Analytics, among others, ensuring technology, training, and field performance continue to align with regulatory and safety goals. Robert, thanks for joining us on the panel today. And it's interesting, both your bio and Andy's opening remarks bring up the regulators. So I think that's something we're going to be visiting. But I'm going to kind of ask you the same question that I asked Andy, only obviously for you, your perspectives and experiences at National Grid. So what's an example of where maybe you have a use case where you're using AI and that's proving to be a difference maker in your damage prevention and public safety efforts? Can you give us a sense of that?
Absolutely. Thank you, Mike. Thank you to the rest of the panelists, and I appreciate the opportunity. I will apologize in advance. The one thing I cannot control is the technical issues that you may hear. There is, of course, as we started this panel of discussion, a contractor started working in the background. So you might hear some noise, but we are all professionals. We will power through, and we will make sure that you guys can hear everything. But yes,
yep, no worries.
Let me give an example of, so National Grid has been using AI tools in our damage prevention space for the better part of 6 or 7 years, mostly in predictive analytics, identifying the riskiest excavation sites. It allows us to deploy our limited field resources where they're needed the most. So we have been working with AI, but 4M is really standing out to us because it is beginning to help us in an area that we've always struggled. 4M stands out because they're able to finally consolidate for us fragmented utility records by using AI to infer the true location of those buried assets and expose conflicts in areas of corridors before the crew even mobilizes. This is a critical area. And for any of you that have read the CGA Dirt Report, there's a background noise I talked about, but any of you that have read the CGA Dirt Report over the years understands that maps and records mismarking your assets is an ongoing issue for the industry. This is definitely going to help in that space, right? Because it's going to improve public safety as we see more accurate, consolidated, and here's the important part, competence-ranked utility corridors that previously required a lot of manual field investigation to identify. Prior to actually doing the work, designers can also use 4M's deliverables to now accurately anticipate utility conflicts at the very beginning, early stages of the life cycle of a project. As a result, National Grid and the industry can now avoid mismarks that are preventable. We can avoid delays, and more importantly, excavation damages that pose some severe safety hazards to the public, to contractors, as well as our own employees. I think that's why we're very excited about what 4M is able to do now. We're starting to move the needle in this space by demonstrating that AI-driven mapping isn't theoretical anymore. it's actually preventing real-world excavation damages and enabling a safer and more controlled work site across at least our territories right now in New York.
All right, good stuff. Well, thank you so much, Robert. We're going to come back to you on a couple of the things you raised. We're going to move on to our third panelist, Kyler Van Golden. Kyler is Principal Analyst for AI Technology and Innovation also at National Grid. Kyler currently manages the AI-driven project portfolio across the New York operating footprint with heavy focus on damage prevention and contractor management space, with a special focus on technology adoption and risk reduction. Kyler holds a BS in Environmental Studies from the State University of New York's College of Environmental Science and Forestry and Syracuse University, graduating magna cum laude. I think your GPA was considerably better than mine, Kyler. Thanks for joining us. I do want to talk with you a little bit about kind of the innovation side of your job, which sounds like that's a big part of it. As you're kind of spearheading and leading the charge on bringing innovation to the forefront, and much like Robert suggested, it's no longer hypothetical or theoretical. It's where you're applying it right now. One of my questions is it's being used. How are you connecting senior leadership at National Grid to the work that's happening in the field where you're leveraging AI? And the corollary to that is, has there been pushback? In other words, a lot of times, and we've all been around utilities on this session for a long time, there's often a disconnect between what's happening in the field and what's happening in the C-suite. So in your experience, when hey, we're showing results, this is new technology that 3 years ago we would have thought we were crazy, but we're doing it now. Is the C-suite stepping in, and do they get it, and are they supportive, or what are some of the challenges therein?
Yeah, no, thank you so much, Mike, for the question. Fantastic opportunity to be here and talk to everybody today. And I will say, for that GPA comment, thank God I was able to retake genetics. So
Okay.
that saved me over there.
All right.
But yeah, I mean, one of the biggest things, part of the reason why I even exist, right, just kind of shows the buy-in from senior leadership. Right, that's the big bet that they're placing in terms of being able to realize AI-related and driven efficiencies. And again, that disconnect has been around forever. Right, the field is operating one way, and the executive leadership team is in a completely different direction. And so I think one of the great things for us is that with this buy-in, that we are now able to kind of build that pipeline that passes through the different levels of leadership, from the standard field worker who is collecting the key data points that are being used to drive the AI algorithm that's making the decision. Right, we're able to kind of highlight those different things in a much more unique way now. And again, you mentioned pushback, right? That's a huge component to this, right? I think everybody on this call, I'd be remiss in saying, that I think everybody's probably afraid in the next, 10, 15 years for their careers. And that does exist at, our ground level union operations. National Grid is a union shop. We have tremendous amount of employees who are in that union and have been doing things the same way that they have been for the last 30 years. So it really does speak to like a change management issue. It's a critical thing. But one of the unique things that we've been seeing is that a lot of the ideas that are actually coming to us, especially around AI-related innovation, they don't come from me, right? I've only spent time in certain facets of the business. Now that we've started launching, communication programs and opportunities, even our union folks are offering suggestions for ways to improve the way that they work. Half the time they're taking that complaint, that anger, that frustration at an antiquated process, right, and voicing those concerns. And now that we kind of have some mechanisms in place to capture that feedback, and then really explore the art of the possible in terms of what's there. Just not related to damage prevention, but we had one just recently. One of our welding workshops just wanted a way in which they could display, operator qualifications digitally. That's all they wanted, just QR code, right? And although it's not AI, right, they now have that mechanism to actually talk to us and talk to the right folks and kind of get those solutions in play. So there's been just a tremendous amount of opportunity in the damage prevention space, as Bob T had mentioned, and that's led to a lot of the work and pretty amazing successes that we've been seeing so far with 4M. So very excited to kind of see the demo and see how that materializes and takes shape at National Grid.
Okay, very good. Thanks for that. I got a couple notes here on a couple things I'm going to want to revisit with you, but let's move on to our fourth panelist. Batting cleanup for us today is Joe Eberly. Joe is the President and Chief Growth Officer at 4M Analytics. He has more than 25 years of experience in construction technology, serving the public and private owner engineering and general contractor markets. Prior to joining 4M, Joe served as the VP of Sales at eBuilder, a capital construction management software company, which was acquired by Trimble in 2018. At Trimble, Joe was responsible for sales, account management, and customer success for the owner and public sector, and led go-to-market launch for Project Site, a project management platform for general contractors. Before entering the technology world, Joe was superintendent and warranty manager for a top 10 development company in the residential building market, and owned a consulting firm focused on construction materials management and value engineering services. What a background, Joe. Thanks for joining us today. Definitely want to dive into this with you a little bit. Now, whereas our first four panelists all come from some of those bellwether utilities, and it's great to have them on board, you have an experience that maybe is a little broader, maybe not as deep in their specific niches, but broader. So when your team approaches a utility and you're saying, look at all these great capabilities we can do, look at all these benefits. When you narrow that down and when you get down to brass tacks, what is the challenge or challenges that you're solving? What are those things that they're grappling with, where the light bulb comes on when you all come in and you can provide kind of a leap forward in what they've been doing? And again, these may be technologies that are years old, processes that are decades old. So how do you approach that? And what do you see are those big problems that you're solving?
Yeah, Mike, thanks for the question. And also thank you to our panelists. And Mike, you're right. I think 4M as a company, and me personally, we are relatively new to the idea of damage prevention in the utility space. But I think we've done a yeoman's job of coming up alongside, folks like Bob and folks like Tyler and folks like Andy to help us apply the work that we're doing on the AI and the technologies side and make it make sense and solve real world challenges that we are seeing across the industry. To your question, I think we're seeing a pretty consistent set of challenges as we work with utilities, across the United States. And if I had to sort of put them into maybe 5 high-level buckets, and there's more than that, but the 5 most consistent that we are hearing and we are seeing start with the number one, when we sit down with a utility and we start to talk about, what are some of these challenges. It's incomplete or outdated underground utility records is the number one thing that we're seeing out there. And it goes to, I think it was Bob that may have mentioned something about what folks like CGA, the Common Ground Alliance, are pointing out is that what utilities need and what operators need out there is access to better data and better mapping. So even some of the most mature organizations still struggle with legacy data, with legacy mapping, and data silos that have existed out there in the industry, not just in the past 5 years, but the past 25 years and the past 30 and 40 years and beyond. So that really is the number one thing that we hear out there is incomplete or outdated utility records. Number 2, we're starting to hear this and get feedback on this quite a bit. And I think maybe it's more broad related to damage prevention in general, and that is locating and ticket volume pressures. So lots of work being done out there, higher volumes of ticket and locating requests. And with that, you experience sort of dealing with workforce shortages in location crews, response times. These types of things really revolve around more tickets, more boots on the ground. And that's a significant challenge that I think we're seeing and hearing across the industry. Number 3, maybe third-party excavation risk is increasing and not decreasing. With let's say, the explosion of fiber and broadband, EV infrastructure, renewable projects, grid hardening projects, the amount of digging around gas and electric, I think, is exploding. The space is limited. And so they are limited in where they can put this new infrastructure. And the ripple effect of that is, okay, we're going to be digging, and we're going to be digging more and more, closer and closer to the assets that are already out there. And that, of course, ties back to limited records, limited understanding of what's out there in terms of the risk that's already underground, especially when you're dropping in hundreds of thousands of linear feet of fiber in the right of ways that already contain sort of a spaghetti mixture of assets already out there. Public events driven by what I would say is bad, maybe bad information that's out there. A huge percentage of the strikes and near misses tie back to missing, inaccurate, or misrepresented data, right? So it's not only the accuracy, but there's things like coverage that come into play when you go do analysis on the strikes and the near strikes that are out there. And part of the issue is, again, tying back to that very first one that we talked about, it's missing or inaccurate data, or data that's not timely enough in the hands of the decisions and the people that are making the decisions in order to use that data more effectively. So I think there's a significant challenge there. And then lastly, lack of unified view across all the sectors that are out there. So every project, I think, touches multiple sectors or intersects in some way with multiple sectors. And utilities know their own data, but oftentimes it's understanding and knowing what's around their assets and what information that they can layer into their own data sets that give them a more complete picture of the risk that's out there. So that, I think, sort of captures the top 5 that we're seeing out there. And 4M as a company, it's our mission and our goal to sort of make the attempt and provide solutions that bring all of those 5 areas together and in focus, and do it in a way that whether you're a utility or whether you're a public sector or whether you're an engineer, you have the ability to get that information and get that data when you need it.
Okay, those are great. And of course, I'll have some follow-ups with you on those as well. But that's a great way to kick us off with those first round of questions. I do want to come back to a couple of things that came up during the opening remarks, and I'm going to start with the role of the regulators. Several of our panelists brought this up, and I'm wondering if you can maybe provide a little color as to what the nature of that is. Is it they want data? Is it they want visuals? Is it a major safety event that happens that just really raises the bar on the value of that information? So I'm opening this up to the whole panel. What is that role of regulators when you start talking about using technology like this? Is it something where they say, oh, that's neat, we'd like to learn more, or are they demanding more information up front? And this is another way to get this to them, because of course, in the investor-owned utility world, those regulators kind of hold the key to a lot of the activity that follows. So can someone just give us a sense of what you're seeing in your work with the regulators?
Hey, Mike,
Yeah,
I'll take this.
Andy.
And hey, thanks. And I wanted to emphasize something that Joe had said as well. Before I get into that, he had talked about the locating volume pressures. I applaud you for bringing that up, Joe. It's a big focus. It pulls your focus away when you have poor ticket quality, potential issues. Like you had said, we're dealing with more work than we've ever dealt with before. Fiber work coming in, water line replacements, who knows what the next big build may be. But looking at those volumes and pressures and trying to help these, get these analytics to help us understand why that's happening and how we can improve ticket quality. Really well said, Joe. And Mike, talking about the role of the regulator. I look at this, and using these analytics and using all this information to help us change laws, to help us change the landscape and make the work easier for all stakeholders. 2023, we used some advanced metrics. We were trying to pull, as a collective stakeholder group together and say, hey, look, we're seeing, we've got a better understanding of what the landscape looks like out there now. Why don't we look at changing whether you can schedule a ticket, how far out you can take that, different tools to free up kind of the stuff that Joe had brought up. And once the regulator heard something like that, and we can say, hey, we can show you how we can, exactly. We can show you exactly where those touch points are and how we can reduce these damages. They're on your side. And then, so building that confidence, getting them in as a partner, they're all about metrics if you've got a good regulatory body. So yeah, I would say using that to help influence changes for the good across your damage prevention footprint.
Okay. Anybody else have any experience with the regulators?
I'll add briefly to that, Mike. Andrew's right. I think for the regulators, it's always about continuous improvement. And listen, historically, that meant, okay, if I want to reduce damages, if I need to get more folks out in the field, that means I probably need to add more field resources, more bodies. That comes at an extreme cost. This, I think, the regulators now look in this space to say, rather than continuing down that road, why don't you look for the tools that will help your existing workforce be more effective and more efficient? And I think that's where they're going to be impressed when they see the type of deliverables that 4M can provide to the staff we already have.
Yeah, that's a good point, Robert. And I'm very fortunate in that the work that I do, I talk with dozens of utilities every month, and I have yet to come across one that in the last year has not initiated some sort of affordability initiative. And they're looking for those efficiencies very actively. So yeah, I think that's a big driver as well. Anyone else want to comment on the role of the regulators before we move on? We good?
Yeah, I would just say, Mike, if I can just chime in there real quickly, right?
Please.
We view it as our job to listen. And one of the ways that we do that, right? It's active listening to our clients, but it's also active listening to those folks out there who are not our clients, who are not using our technology, right? Because there's valuable information that's in there in sort of the ecosphere of folks that are interested in damage prevention, but the combination of the use of our product and those folks who are maybe they're using other products or other technologies, right? So we're actively listening to as much information as we can and as much feedback as we can out there, whether it's on the conference circuits or whether we're meeting with clients or whether we're sort of in investigation mode where I might go to an 811 and sit down with them and say, hey, walk me through an average day at the 811 center here. All of that information is coming back into 4M because the reality is that when you're putting together sort of a model that's based on AI, the more you can put into that, the more feedback, the more intelligence that you can put into that, the better it's going to get over time.
Okay, very good. An iterative process in working with the regulators, I'm sure. That's good. Another thing that has come up, not only in the first round of opening questions, but just in this next round of questions, is data. And I want to talk about a little bit with you all trusting the data. And as I've mentioned in some of our previous discussions, I've been in this space for going on 36 years, and I can remember some of my early work was in the GIS space, where in terms of data availability and data accuracy, I can remember having discussions with utilities where, well, there's absolute accuracy and relative accuracy. In other words, absolute accuracy, the pole is here. Relative accuracy as well, it's on the northeast corner of the intersection, right? So it's two very different things. And fast forward in some of the work I've done in the last 10 years in the analytics space, questions around the quality of the data that's going to enable you to do some of these really cool analytic driven use cases, or in this case, AI driven use cases. So I wanted to ask not just about data in general, but are you finding that there are data trust issues? Because again, in many cases, these are processes that are years or decades old. And now all of a sudden there's this new figurative overlay or literal overlay of data to these processes. So people have to really trust the data. So can you all share maybe some thoughts or experiences where, hey, well, this is new, this is great, we're going to run with it, or hey, now wait a minute, I've been doing this for 20 years, and the data may tell us this, but I know this circuit better than anybody. That real world stuff, right? So can you all speak to maybe the data trust issue a little bit and what you're encountering in that world?
Yeah, maybe if I can jump on that one first, and then I'll turn it over to my colleagues, right? So for sure, right, as a company, like 4M faces every day in every conversation that we have the question about trust, the question about the validation of the data that comes out of this sort of AI environment. How do I, as a utility owner, or how do I, as an excavator, trust that what I'm seeing in the 4M maps is accurate? How do I trust that the information related to, let's say, I'm digging in and I'm doing some research around the gas network, around the water network there. How do I know that the information that's being presented to me is accurate or is complete? And so our goal really, and the way we view accuracy, because it's the number one question that I get asked everywhere that I go, is how accurate is your data? Accuracy to us is a partnership, and accuracy to us is a journey that we do together. 4M is not here to solve accuracy for everybody and the entire market. What we're here is to present a level of data, and then collectively we work together to improve the accuracy of that data. And now, if I take a step back away from accuracy for a second, because we know how important that is, our goal and our effort is that part of accuracy is establishing foundation. What does that mean? How can 4M deliver a foundation data set that is focused on coverage levels, right? And that incrementally increases my ability to understand the risk, understand what I'm dealing with out in the real world. And if I can deliver you a level of completeness of data, then together we can take on the journey of accuracy. So I'll just sort of lay that out there as maybe the starter for that accuracy conversation.
Yeah, I like the framing of it as a journey, particularly because there's so much infrastructure that you're dealing with. It's not a one and done. So yeah, and I think Andy, I think you had unmuted. You were going to jump in on the data and trust issue as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I kind of would I'll say this. First off, that's exactly so many of these data and trust issues are why we want to work and are piloting things and approaching or listening to companies like 4M. We have so many, so much legacy cable we could look at. I could give an example. 25 years ago in our law, it said, hey, all gas facilities must be mapped, but single home dwelling service lines for telecom, electric, et cetera, are exempt. So there you go. Our mapping does not need to include that. Now you fast forward 25 years, maybe back then it looked okay, but now we know that's a lot of data we wish we still had, or wish we had been collecting this whole time. So that to us, is integral. We have to pick up from where we might have left off then and use some of these tools to gain back some of that data. Now I'm very confident that our facilities run well. We have competent locators in our state, but being able to get them started in the right location is so important to this process. And then looking, just talking about, data quality issues across, just the landscape, we can look at the 811 call centers. So many of those, like we still, our trading name or our name, Dominion Energy at the state level is Virginia Electric and Power Company. So you can imagine excavators are calling the system saying VEPCO, Virginia Power, Dominion Energy, Dominion, DE. There is so much going on there, and we can't see, we would love to know how many tickets were called in over our facility by our vendors, et cetera, et cetera. We can see AI as being able to help us there. You know, we just our call center just switched over to a newer system. That system's able to kind of help us out in a lot of those situations and you know, compare that data, make sure, you know, okay, all this is Dominion specific. We're changing this to Dominion Energy, and now we have a, you know, really good overview of how many tickets were called in, you know, over our plant or for our plant. So that's just a couple ways, but yeah, looking at what some of the options 4M has, it's very exciting to be able to fill in some of those gaps.
Okay, good. Anyone else want to comment on data and trust issues that maybe you've encountered in your organization?
Yeah, I can add a brief comment.
Yeah, please jump in.
You know, we've seen just so much of, you know, it's garbage in, garbage out, right? And our, you know, the data that I have is only going to be as good as the mood that the guy was in when he was doing the data capture, especially for when it comes from the field, right? And I can tell you from just the, you know, experience working in the field, right? It's tougher than a lot of people think, right? And you know, like we talk about utility depth, right? So we have minimum standards for our installs to be, you know, 3 feet down in general, right? When, you know, where applicable and everything. And otherwise, we have procedures that dictate shallower services like everyone else would. And you know, there's a difference between 34 inches down and 35 inches down, right? And I'll tell you, on the hottest of hot days or the coldest of cold days, do you really think someone's going to spend the time to pull a tape measure out and kind of, you know, really get in there and make sure that they're measuring that to an absolute certainty? And the answer is you have some folks who will, right? And we've kind of come across that in data. Like, you know, it's sad to say, but like, we'll look at some of those more rigorous, you know, individuals who really do, you know, value that data capture. And we'll use them to baseline things. And then we'll see the same person who every single gas service they installed for the entire year is all at 36 inches exactly, right? And so you kind of have those two different challenges there where, you know, it's not necessarily a data entry issue because you are getting data. It's just, it's being rounded. It's being, you know, just haphazardly input. And the thought process in the field is, well, you know, I'm here replacing the gas line. I'm not going back out there for another 50 to 100 years, right? So to someone else's problem. And we've kind of suffered from that. You know, the sins of the past, you know, have come back to haunt us, right? In terms of either data that we do capture, and also, like Andrew brought, this is one of the best points out there, is data that we don't capture, right? Data that we're not capturing is a complete missed opportunity, 100%. So, you know, I think that's exactly where, you know, a company like 4M, we're really excited for it because, you know, it's giving us access to other data that we haven't had. We're not keeping track of a mark out that was done 15 years ago, right? Wherein the 4M platform can kind of go back in time and look through things. Like we found, you know, old retired assets by using the platform, right? Assets that we had no record of, right? Because through our multiple handoffs, you know, things have just gotten lost. That single sheet of paper that was supposed to get submitted just didn't, right? And so we've been finding, you know, really interesting and amazing successes in that regard. So it's really changing the game for us in terms of being able to operate in a much more unique fashion with this fragmented and disjointed data that just a lot of utilities have.
Yeah, and I think one of the key phrases that you all used a couple of times is data capture. Sometimes that's the easiest part of it. Sometimes that's the hardest part of it, right? And some of that's cultural, some of that's training, but boy, that matters. We're having some questions coming in from our audience. So with this discussion about data, I think this is a good time to bring up one of the questions. And this involves a network model, which of course is pretty darn important. So I'm going to just phrase the question, and I think, Joe, you might want to take the first swing at it, but if our other panelists want to add in, that's fine as well. The question is, for a single source of truth, which we all like when we're managing data, does 4M have an equivalent of a network model manager? That's going to be a pretty important part of the puzzle, I would think. So how do you all approach that at 4M?
Yeah, first, I think it's important that anybody that claims themselves as a single source of truth is really missing the big picture. 4M certainly doesn't claim itself as the single source of truth. In fact, we strive and we make every effort, and we put a lot of attention on partnerships, on working with specifically our clients. I had a CTO. In fact, this morning I was on a call with a CTO of a very large locating company, and this person said to me, "Hey, you guys are collecting public data," which is true. Public data is one of the data sources that we're using. But he says, if that's all you're collecting, then that's simply not good enough. And I was taken aback a little bit, because in a model where multiple data sources are always going to be better than a single data source, I was taken aback by the fact that this person didn't understand or didn't seem to want to acknowledge that the aggregation of data is the breaking down of those silos that have existed in the industry for many, many years. Now, to the question, because we don't think of the 4M data as sort of network data, yes, we are putting together many, many data sources. Public sector data is one of them. Aerial imagery is another. GIS systems, permitting information. All of this is what we refer to as a constellation of data. And here's something that might blow your hair back a little bit, is that in most cases, it's not the absence of data or missing data that we have to deal with on the front end of providing this. It's almost always too much data. Meaning I've managed to collect multiple data sources that tell me different things about a gas line in a right-of-way in a particular area. Is it on the left side of the road? Well, one data source says that it is. Is it on the right side of the road? That's another data source that says it's on the right side of the road. And so our job is to bring together this constellation of information that tells me, okay, where should I represent that through visual evidence? Things like we've added the ability to identify historical road marks. So locators are going out there, they're spraying lines all over the country. We are collecting that information, geolocating that, and bringing it back into that constellation to be able to say, okay, record set A is likely more accurate than record set B. And so we take record set B and we move it to the background, move record set A up, and then use this constellation as evidences or proofs of what we're saying where this particular line is. Sorry, I went on a little bit there because I think there's a lot of background before you can get to the idea that the 4M data is, one, a single source of information, which it's not. And then two, whether or not it's equivalent to a network model. And that's where working with our clients, National Grid and others, is that we can begin to bring that model network together with the information that we have and explore and understand, okay, how close are we to that network model? Or where are areas that we can improve on the data that we can bring to bear so that the network model, whether it's the accuracy of it, whether it's the completeness of it, or whether it's the cycle by which that network model is updated, we can put in place solutions that enable everybody to get closer to whatever the ground truth is out there.
Okay. All right. That was great. I do want to move on, and we have another question from the audience, and I'm going to just take a slight twist to the question that was asked. And I want to tie in one of the things that Kyler was talking about, where you're getting that buy-in from the C-suite. Our question from the audience deals with constrained budgets. So my question is, when you're getting that buy-in, be it from the C-suite, be it from the supervisors, what role does cost play there? I mean, obviously we've talked a lot about effectiveness, efficiency, safety. Cost, of course, is part of all that equation. So Kyler, maybe you can start with where does cost fit into that, where the light bulb goes off for that supervisor, manager, director, executive, and they're saying, okay, we need to move forward with this, or pilot this and move forward with this. So where does that all fit into that whole puzzle?
Yeah, it's a great question. Yeah, because truth be told, right, anything is possible with infinite time and money. And
Right.
it's, how do we prioritize those different things? So yeah, I mean, one of the easy things for us at National Grid is we are structured in a way that helps us kind of avoid a lot of the headaches that come around with budgeting and planning, and really almost asking an operation to dive in head first before they even kind of get a proof of concept or even a pilot that says that the technology really truly works and fits for their organization. So we deal with it in two ways. We're very lucky at National Grid in the New York gas business to have an R&D team who specializes specifically in running pilots for new types of technology, whether it's AI related software solutions or even robotics or engineering type solutions. So that is extremely lucky. So we have this kind of third party group that exists that we can go to with these ideas and then establish proof of concepts with. And then at the conclusion of those, right, what we get is we get almost essentially a yay or a nay, right, a go or no go, right, that this does fit for the business or it doesn't fit for the business. And that's when we're kind of able to make that case to leadership, because obviously once you complete a successful pilot, right, the next stage to that is, well, how do I get this from pilot to business adoption, right? How do we take something that we've spent 6 months to a year, testing and putting through its paces, and now make it an enterprise-wide solution? And so it does come with a little bit of costing as well. We obviously love to prioritize type 1 savings. Type 1 savings for us are hard dollar for dollar savings. Literally we're just going to straight up save money. And then there's kind of those type 2 savings, which take a little bit of a backseat. That's the labor efficiency side. But there is value there as well, right? We think of them as truck rolls, right? If I'm able to eliminate truck rolls, I'm able to have my resources be more productive in other types of activities. So we look into those different things, and then ultimately how this materializes at the leadership level is a prioritization, conversation. So we meet with the executive steering committee within New York Gas quarterly, and we review at least our assessment, right? The assessment that I make and my leadership team directly, where we say, we think that this should be the priority, and then we kind of let the executives and senior leadership team duke it out and kind of tell us why something should be reprioritized versus something else. Because again, we don't always have the full picture of what's going on in the gas business. So I think that's one of the main ways in which we're able to strategically prioritize this and get these things from inception to ultimately that proof of concept and then adopted by the business.
Yeah, sometimes that's a very long path to follow for sure.
Yeah.
Robert and Andy, do you have anything to add in terms of where cost fits into when your organization is making a move forward type of decision?
Yep. Yeah, I'll follow up on what Kyler just described. So our journey started with 4M with the intent of, can it be a way for us to minimize cost, right? I think the question just, talked about, we have constrained budgets in our operations teams, no different in damage prevention. And can 4M, listen, the idea is fantastic, but is this just an additional cost that maybe the regulators don't want to fund or the ratepayers don't want to pay for? We see value there, but what are we really getting here in the beginning? And so one of our initial, taking that first step with 4M was, hey, where can their solution help us reduce cost, right? Because costs are rising everywhere, right? Inflation, you name it, one call volume goes up. Along with that comes the cost that goes up with it. Part of what we do in the damage prevention space, at least at National Grid, is we receive quite a large number of design ticket requests that come in throughout the year through the 811 system. Those design requests usually end up going one of two routes. Either we send our locating vendor out to put paint on the ground, which comes at a cost, or they actually request the as-built from our design team. That takes hours to do. It takes weeks to do. And obviously there is a cost to that. It's pulling resources away from what their day-to-day job is now to pull the as-built drawings that the requester is looking for. And then think about the cost from from the folks that are requesting it. Now they have to go in the field and kind of validate what the marks are on the ground with the as-built. It's a lot of redundant, unnecessary expense and time that goes into this. So for the 4M solution to provide us with an immediate, cost-effective way to handle those design tickets, that scratched our itch, right? We suddenly said, hey, you know what? There's definitely a cost avoidance and a cost savings component to 4M. But what was interesting to us as we went down this road with 4M, that was our initial open of the door discussion. But as we sat in the room with our engineers and our operations teams and 4M, that's when we started to realize, you know where else this can be valuable? In this space. 4M can also help over here. Now they're in the door. We're already seeing a cost savings, but now we're also seeing the greater impact that 4M's digital solution can provide everywhere else that the damage prevention team wasn't even thinking about initially. So it's definitely helping us, and it is an affordable option.
Yeah, and we're talking about cost, but I was glad to hear you bring up time. I think that our industry is staring down some urgency in terms of improving the grid, expanding capacity. And again, when you look at aging infrastructure, load growth, these types of issues, we have to change the way we've been doing things. And I think time is a big piece of that as well. And Andy, it looks like maybe you want to jump into this piece as well.
Bob and Kyler said it really well. I just wanted to add, one of the things here, something that we talk about a lot, or a lot of us deal with, is ticket screening. Tickets get screened, they look at them by the work type or however they're doing it, and then somebody doesn't go out there to do the work, or somebody doesn't visit the site. I am of the mindset, being with an electric utility, that really the only way to do that and do it well is to have your maps fully realized. Have good, where the overhead is, where those terminal poles are, and then where it goes to underground. Once you do that, or at least I can speak for what I feel with Dominion Energy, then we could start down a path of, okay, could we do this? Could we do that? I think this is a huge first step for something like that. Fully realizing your maps, getting them accurate, and then take whatever natural next step your company may need to take towards screening or what have you. But again, I only bring that up because it can't be done without good mapping. So yeah, it's part of the business, but I appreciate what 4M's doing, because yeah, we can certainly do a lot more with that kind of information.
And Mike, before you move on,
Yeah.
You talk about time and cost, right? So we operate in the downstate New York territory, which involves the largest municipality in the world, right? The city of New York. The city of New York is the largest municipality in the world that does not ever respond and locate their assets. So our gas crews, third-party excavators, anyone doing work in the city of New York has to have for the past decades figured out workarounds, because they have no choice. They have to read the street themselves. They have to find workarounds, spend the time and the money test holing, potholing, to just hand dig and verify where they believe the water and sewer lines and the steam lines are. And when you talk to New York City and you say, listen, you're mandated by the state of New York to be part of the 811 system and respond to these 811 tickets, they tell us, they're very honest about it. They tell us and say, do you know how old our system is and how much time and money it would take for the city of New York to map accurately all of our assets? We just can't do it. So this solution for our crews is going to be critically important in reducing the unnecessary time and expense that our crews are finding, can help reduce the time on site and make them safer. It's solving a problem that's been out there, at least in the city of New York, forever, since I started in the company.
Yeah, that's an interesting conundrum, I'm sure. The city not having the data. So
hey Mike, real quick too, something I left out.
Yeah.
And very, very quick.
Yeah.
look no further than your locate cost 5 to 6 years ago, what they are now, and then extrapolate that and what they will be 5 to 6 years from this point. So I think you can really look at that. Making some of these investments could really have a cost benefit, and if you do that cost benefit analysis, you'll see how that'll improve your process.
Okay. And
Yeah,
I
I
think,
was just gonna,
Joe, jump in.
Yeah, let me jump in there, right? Because when prior to working here and the work we're doing at 4M, when I thought about New York, I always thought about sort of pizza and the New York Yankees. Nowadays, when I think about New York, I think about spaghetti. The spaghetti under the ground, it goes without saying, it's a very, very difficult environment from a data perspective. Some of the data sources are so old that they're just simply not available to 4M or anybody else. And then working in the environment that oftentimes is challenging in New York and the boroughs around there. And so what that has done for us is caused us to say, okay, let's think outside of the box here, right? The availability of records, the accuracy of records. Is there a way using technology that we can, for example, map the entire water network for the city and all the surrounding boroughs and up into Long Island? And so we began the process of sort of exploring, again, using signals that we have, video evidence, imagery evidence, line marking evidence, records evidence, and a host of other things. Can we bring that all together in a constellation that says, okay, now let's let the AI do the work of trying to draw the network. And so we've been testing that, we've been molding that, we've been adjusting that work to the point where we think the ability for AI to draw an entire network, like in the city of Philadelphia or the city of New York, is possible. And it's going to be possible very, very soon. And so this was our effort, right, to take all this information, take feedback from, Kyler and Bob and others that we talked to and say, okay, let's get creative here and use the power of the technology in a way that nobody else has ever done to solve this problem that simply can't be solved using the techniques and the methods that are out there in place historically, right? And that's one of the paths that we're going down, is to determine, okay, how do we do this at scale? So now that we can do it in the city of New York, or in the city of New York, can we do it in the state of New York? Or can we do it in the state of Pennsylvania? We believe the answer is yes, we can do that.
Okay, good. I want to go back to one of Joe's top 5 issues, but I'm going to ask our utility members of the panel today to maybe provide a little insight into this. Issue number 2 was locating and ticketing volume pressures. And I'm wondering, and one of the panelists, I didn't mark who it was, but said, yeah, we're seeing that too. So when I hear something like, my first thought is, well, what's driving this? So I'm hoping, from our utility panelists, can you share an example of maybe what's driving an increase, or are you seeing an increase even in this locating and ticket volume pressures? I think that's an interesting dynamic, because as you have affordability initiatives and the challenges therein, but there's a very tangible increase in the workload, you have to start looking for efficiencies. But what's driving this change, this increase in volume pressure? Anybody want to take a shot at that?
I mean, it probably started with the infrastructure bill a few years ago, right? So cities like New York and municipalities on Long Island, as an example, they are doing roadway improvements, and just there's a lot more work being performed. And what happens when the work volume goes up? You're also dealing with increased costs on the locate side and the ability to handle that. So again, I apologize for the background construction, so I'll make this quick. I mean, you have to find ways to, how do you absorb those increase in volumes and the increase in costs? You have to find a way to look for efficiencies elsewhere. And I think 4M is helping us with that.
Okay. All right. Does that ring true for you, Andy?
So absolutely, and I'd also, go back to the ticket quality stuff that we discussed. Let's just look at something that's an everyday part of the process: updates. Kyler talked about truck rolls. What we want in the system are tickets that are going to be dug on and worked within whatever time frame exists in your state. Let's just use Virginia for an example. We have a 15 working day window, and which really translates to about 30 calendar days. We still see, update tickets that'll come in saying, hey, go back out to this site, put marks down so that we can, dig. Well, then we'll see 81 updates, on a ticket, or, we'll see these huge updates go out. That's the type of stuff, looking at that, rolling those trucks, being able to use analytics and those cost drivers. I mean, that's the kind of stuff that really keeps the marks and the focus, away from what the work being done in the field. The important stuff, what is definitely going to be worked on, within 15 working days or however many in your system. So I mean, that's an existing driver now. And I know with technologies, being able to pull up, hey, here's a ticket load, for a reasonable ticket load for a locator. Yet we're seeing this type of volume. I just think being more precise and more specific with the tickets that are being called in would be a huge game changer for the industry.
Okay. All right. Joe, thanks for teeing that one up. We're getting close to where we're going to transition over to looking at some of the technology. And one of the things that I wanted to do with each panelist, maybe go back to our initial order when we opened up today's session, I want to ask each of you to share what I like to call a before and after story. What that means is, here's how we used to do stuff, and as we've applied technology and process improvement, et cetera, here's how we do it now. I think sometimes that's the best way to demonstrate how dramatically different, hopefully improved, different business processes are, field operations are. So I'm going to ask each of you in the order that we started to share a before and after story, if you could. So Andy, unfortunately, you're going first. I'm putting you on the spot a little bit here, but can you share what I like to call a before and after story with us today?
Yeah, absolutely. I would go back, to kind of what we talked about with our electric outage analysis program. Before, we were working with, we didn't have the predictors. We didn't have a lot of information to really go back and look specifically at tickets. So we would use, organize those as work types, or use just different, methodologies that, some of our cable locating companies, some of our, regulators, as we all got together, said, hey, how can we, monitor these tickets and reduce, we talked about the CGA earlier. One of the biggest, one of the bigger goals is 50 and 5. How do we drive down the damage ratio by 50% in 5 years? Doing it at that pace, trying to get all that information together, with previous technologies was very daunting. Now, we have this outage analysis. We can look at trends. We can look at excavators' history that have damaged our facility. We can go back and make a much more pointed and specific intervention over, and again, look at heat maps. Is this a consistent issue in Northern Virginia or Southern Virginia? And we know different spots or different areas have different problems. Is their top 3 the same? Probably so. No calls, no conflicts, whatever the case may be. But it is different as you have different geographies. So this system, before I felt like we were in the dark ages. We were trying to do our best. We were using tons of resources and a lot of people to go out and look at these different spots. Well, now we can have a more pointed approach and a specific approach to go out there and say, we know this ticket could potentially have an issue. Let's have an intervention. Let's talk to that excavator.
Yeah, and the before part of your story sounds like it was excruciatingly manual.
Absolutely. Right? So it could have been more manual. Absolutely.
Right. All right, Robert, how about you? Do you have a good before and after story you can share with us?
Yeah, I do. I touched on it previously, right? So before 4M, it was our design ticket workflow was a highly manual process, resource intensive. Every design ticket from the call center resulted in hours of work, right? Locating company, engineering teams, doing field visits. It also impacted the group that was actually going to do the work. So their schedules were typically delayed because of the uncertainty of the subsurface conditions. Well, now that we've implemented 4M solution, we now have immediate visibility into subsurface utility corridors without sending a single person to the field, which is critical, right? Because those folks can now be utilized in more important roles rather than just wasting their time going out, just putting marks down for just design purposes. Conflicts, like for the design teams, right? The conflicts are flagged algorithmically, right? It allows the engineers to produce a more accurate, construction-ready design much, much earlier in the process. These design reviews, they would typically take days and weeks, and now they only take hours. And it can all be done from a desktop, right? There's no longer this need for somebody to be required to go into the field to verify everything. So this shift has been dramatic, right? It used to be an OpEx heavy activity, and now it's like a largely digital, low-cost desktop review. So that's really our before and after story right now.
Yeah, and as you were describing that, I was thinking about, we talked about trusting the data earlier. Your example really draws that out. Well, this isn't how we used to do it. Well, trust the data, man. And sounds like you guys have hit it squarely there. Kyler, how about you? You're doing some of the leading edge stuff. Do you have a good before and after story you can share?
Yeah, so I'll bring it back, and the reason I say this is because I want everyone to understand that you don't have to have this major transformational shift, right? It can start small. Again, right? It could be as simple as moving from paper processes to mobile devices, forms, things like that. Just your standard data standardization stuff. It was back in like 2018. I had the privilege and great pain. I'm surprised I still have all my hair. With getting around 120 union inspectors off of literally just journals, like paper journals and binders for documenting their construction activities that they oversaw to iPads. Wow. We were using a company called Locust View as well to help us with like the data capture piece in the field. But just, I took it for granted how some of these folks who have been with the company for 30, 40 years, right, had just truly never used devices like this. And so it was a huge change management effort. I spent months, almost like 6 months, just going in at like 5:30 in the morning, 6 o'clock, meeting these guys where they were every single day, spending hours and hours and hours with them to just work on just how to open up their iPad. I say hit the home button, right? By the way, it doesn't even exist on an iPad anymore, right? Hit the home button, and they don't understand what that means, right? Swipe up, close out of the application, right? These different things that I just took for granted. And so I always kind of share this story. It makes me think about this around the holiday times. But one of the employees that I had, who's retired from National Grid now, but had been there for 40 years, sent me an email about a year later with the subject line that his iPad was working better today. And so he says in the email, it was a joke thing around December 20th. But he goes, last night I went home and poured a nice tall Jameson and stopped by the wood stove. I started my company issued Jack in the Box gremlin filled iPad. And I watched the National Grid Christmas video and holiday message. Very powerful stuff. I shut it down, placed it on the coffee table gently, and I pondered my future and got another Jameson. I returned to my chair by the fire and looked at the Christmas tree. Very pretty, I thought. My loving wife saw me sitting quietly and thought I needed something to do. So she went to the kitchen and gave me a huge bag of walnuts, and in her sweetest warden-type voice told me that if I didn't shell the walnuts, there would be no Christmas cookies. I went looking for the nutcracker. It wasn't near the Jamesons. I went back to my chair and saw my iPad. I picked up my device, spread the walnuts on the table, and proceeded to smash the nuts on the coffee table. The shells went in the wood stove, the walnut meat and the cookies, and today my iPad is working properly. Merry Christmas to all my friends and coworkers, sent from my nut-cracking device, Brian Dwyer. So, it makes me think about it every time because I kind of think that that's change management done well, right? And those are those small wins that you can take And that was back in 2019. And the group is still using this platform today, and they're able to check operator qualification. So it's these small steps, right, that ultimately yield your large scale transformation initiatives. So it just makes me think about that around the holiday times. This is like one of the funniest emails I'd ever received.
Great iPad story. You know, we do want to jump over to look at some of this technology, but Joe, did you want to just maybe comment on the before and after aspect just real briefly, because we do want to jump over?
Yeah, I'll be brief. So for us, we always ask, who is our consumer? Our consumer is the people that rely on utility services of all kinds across the United States. And you know, our goal, maybe in the before and after vein, is if today it costs you, let's say, $100,000 to do the research and develop the designs for a project, our goal is to cut that significantly so that the cost savings and the efficiencies can be.
I think Joe froze on us. Joe, I'm not sure if you can hear me, but I think you froze on us.
Yeah, I think I'm back there. I had a quick disruption, but can you hear me okay?
Yeah, you're good now. Y'all hearing me?
Yeah, Mike, you're on. I think Joe's having some internet issues there.
Okay, Joe, this might be just an opportunity for us just to jump over to the live look at the technology. I think our audience is probably dying to get a look at that. So again, thanks so much to our panel today. Thanks to our audience for joining us. PJ, I'm going to hand it over to you, and thanking our sponsor and moving us on to the next phase of what we're doing here today.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Fantastic conversation, by the way, and thank you for joining us. As promised, we're shifting into our demo after party hosted by 4M's own Paul Olnick. So for a deeper look at how 4M uses AI for utility mapping. Stay with us if you can for just a quick live demo, and give us just a moment and we'll get started here. Paul, I'm going to hand you controls, and as I do, I'd like to welcome you to the event. You should have the floor. Take it away.
Thank you, PJ. So it was great to hear how Dominion and National Grid are rethinking damage prevention with innovative technology. So good afternoon, everyone. Paul Olenick here. I'll be with you for the final 12 minutes here or so, share how utilities are arming themselves with instant, reliable utility data by walking through the live data set here in 4M. So go ahead and post those questions in the chat. Be happy to answer as we go through. So today we spoke about the challenge of damage prevention. How can we reverse engineer the network in real time when records are inaccurate or incomplete, like Bob alluded to in New York City? Or conversely, when you're planning a new infrastructure project or modernizing your assets, how can you quickly understand the foreign utility risks? So historically, what you would have to do for a quick desk study is you're going to scour your local GIS databases. You're going to coordinate with utilities and try and capture whatever information you can. You're going to source a number of as-built in whatever condition you can find them. And then you're going to try and put that all together, make sense of it. You got all this raw data, and in this process, it might have taken you weeks and potentially months, depending on where you're located. That makes this process unfeasible or just a huge bottleneck. So what we're going to do today is I'm going to share with you how you can access live data on the fly. Now, I'm in Greeley, Colorado. One of the things that we've done at 4M is we've proactively mapped a number of states, much of the country. And what this means is that you can simply, if you have access to the platform, you could simply draw a polygon, or you can upload a KMZ and kick off your next feasibility study, whatever it may be, as on the fly. So let's go ahead and do that. Here you're going to see quickly a number of utilities popping up immediately: water, sewer, irrigation, comms, power, all right away. So this has been sourced from millions of data points like construction as-built, GIS databases, construction documents, and many more But then we're going to take it a step further. This is then enriched with additional imagery to help you make sense of the lines. So our team, after you, or automatically after you have requested your project area and you've received the utility lines, within just an hour or so, you're also going to see utility surface features added to the data set. In this case, was 550 surface features in quick order. And so what this results in is now you've got a quick preliminary study of utility lines, such as water and wastewater sourced from the city, as you see here, a lot of times with sizes and material types, down to power, comms, and more. Now, many of you have worked with records and you've thought, hey, is this it? Is this everything? Is this accurate? And so one of the things that we've developed over the past year to help increase the confidence that you have in the utilities landscape wherever you are is this addition of surface features to help you make sense of the records that are coming in. So check this out. We're going to come down the street here and I see comms, the orange lines. I see power running down from Excel. I see the city water. I see the city stormwater. Where's the gas? So even when a gas record isn't always immediately available, you can, as we talked about, reverse engineer the network. So let's take a look. We see here's yellow spray paint marks here, and we can follow it all the way down the line. We can trace it in, and all of a sudden we're seeing the yellow lines highlighted. Come up over here, and we're seeing the yellow lines highlighted all the way back to the gas meter. And this is done simply with machine learning. We're able to quickly track that yellow paint back to the gas meter, your service line very quickly, so you can call out potential, where is the line, or how can I avoid the line? Additionally, you can use the same type of data set to look at and confirm the water line, such as right here, we see the blue water line, and we can verify that with the blue markings right there. And then check this out. If we come up north, this can be used even with power, for example. So if we come up this way on this street, so I see the Excel Energy line running north to south up here. And I might think, hey, there's probably more here. So let's zoom in. And we're seeing the red spray paint marks. Zoom in here. And we're seeing Excel street light right on the ground. So this was all picked up with machine learning. Again, this is something that might have taken weeks or months for you to reverse engineer. And the important thing here is today, I did this in Colorado, the city of Greeley here today, but this data is available all over the country. And so if you would be interested in seeing this data set in your area, I'm gonna go ahead and post my calendar into the chat. You can book time with us, as well as my email address. And you can see this data set in your area. Now, I'll go ahead and pause for 1 minute to see if we have any questions here from the team or the crowd. And then as we wrap things up, we've got about 6 minutes left. I'm going to walk you through a few other things that utilities are utilizing heavily within the platform. So now that you've got this great set of data here, as we've done here in Greeley, one of the things you'll want to take note of is, okay, I've got this nice data set. I need to be able to make decisions upon it. Okay, so let's take, for example, perhaps I'm doing a overhead to underground routing study, and I want to take that power underground. One of the things you might consider doing here is using the utility routing feature. You might run up here against the north end is option 1, or run along the south end is option 2. So with this analysis, we're going to call this street lighting 5 inches, 5 on the width, and go ahead and do the comparison. You're going to be able to do a live comparison on both, are you in the right of way, and what parcels are you crossing? I'm going to backtrack out and share with you that. But we saw a routing study on the north side of the street versus the south side of the street. How many utilities are you crossing under each scenario? And then what are my crossings within residential or commercial parcels? So as we back out on that, I'm going to share that with you right away, such as here's the land ownership that you can take into account. And then here is the estimated right of way for folks looking to stay within the right of way. Okay, we got a couple of questions that I see coming in. So Nikita asks, how is your utilities coverage in suburban areas on city outskirts? And I would say it is very solid. So one of the keys that we'll note is again, we've done this across entire states. And you can find record information all over our state, right? Anywhere there's been, call it transportation projects, there's been any sorts of projects in the area, you can extract information from various data sets to capture line information. But additionally, wherever you have street level coverage, you've got great eyeballs on the project area. So when you're in the right of way, you can find a number of surface features out there. And if you don't have great street level coverage, then you can utilize aerial imagery from other services. So to summarize, great coverage in even suburban areas in addition to urban areas. And let's see what other questions we have. We're going back. Can 4M integrate this utility data with GIS or other geospatial software vendors? So yes, absolutely. You'll notice here, one of the things that we've developed is an API key for you to connect and stream information live with your existing databases, or it's as simple as downloading your KML or your CAD file and then re-importing it into your local network if you didn't want to set up the API. Thanks, Eric. And then we have one more question. In what ways do AI-based damage prevention systems enhance public safety outcomes? So one of the things we talked about today was mapping redundancy and how can we have an additional set of eyes anytime we're doing damage analysis, right? So one of the things that we've worked on with some of our clients is can we retroactively, could we have found the utility strike? And so that's a situation where historical imagery comes into play. Kyler spoke a little bit about, oh, we had the document, but it didn't get filed, it didn't get put in the right place, and then it just was in the ether. And so by going back into time with our clients, what we're able to do is say, hey, you know, there isn't a record here today, but we can see this spray paint mark, or we can see this road repair. We could see this trenching from 2017 or 2004 and whatever it may be. And we can use that as evidence to deduce that there is a line there, even when there is not a record behind it. So thank you for the question, Kathy. And again, if you have interest in either using historical imagery or bringing your own data to help facilitate an even more confidence that you have in your utility network, I've got that link to my calendar. You can go ahead and book some time. Lastly, I want to call ahead a little bit about ways we're thinking ahead, right? So in this project area, I'm going to pull up the 4M agent, and we're thinking about a lot of ways that this could be utilized for folks. And today, we see the project area, and one of the things we've built in is, can you provide me a SUE cost report for this project area? And we can utilize either local calculations, or we can use your discretion for calculations that you see in your area. But let's say I wanted to get a level D study on this area in Greeley. And we're going to go through a number of calculations. We're going to come up with a number of $26,000. And so this is based on our numbers that we've computed. versus, this was turned around in the lines immediately, and then the surface features within an hour or so. So this can really be used to subsidize what you're already doing today. And I see I'm at time, so I'm going to call it off there. I just want to say Energy Central, thanks for having us, and appreciate all the great questions. And again, feel free to reach out if you have further questions.
Thanks, Paul. And thanks to our fantastic panel today. What an amazing event. And of course, 4M, thanks for making today's event possible. For our audience, thanks for tuning in. Keep an eye out for a follow-up email with the link to the replay. Before you go, please take a quick moment to fill out our short survey. Your feedback helps us make each power session even better. On behalf of Energy Central, the whole team, thank you for spending a part of your day with us. We look forward to seeing you on an upcoming event. This concludes today's presentation.